What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, following up with the travesty and the tragedy that is going on in Iran right now, I thought it was interesting the the countries that came out against striking Iran, which was a multitude. In fact, there were really no one that I can reference outside of President Trump of the United States that was really eager for President Trump to stop the massacre of the people in Iran. And he has since backed down, which shows you President Trump is not a rogue actor. I think he's a regionalist. I think this is a person that is focused on the U.S. sphere of influence, and he has no problem with regionalism. And of course, with this concept where your backyard is my backyard, your backyard is your backyard, is mine. Um, that type of mentality, what is that going to do? It's going to fragment the world, so to speak. But this is in contrast to an idea of being a global policeman, for lack of better phrasing, where some people said America was doing. So you have a situation where President Trump stepped away against his own nature and at the urging of a lot of nations. And a lot of those nations that were against the bombing that came out publicly or that were revealed were in the Middle East. And looking at some of those countries, I also came across an interesting story because I started to see a pattern with some of these countries. Some of the countries involved were Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Now, for those that don't know, they are on the verge of forming Islamic NATO right now. What started off where you had a situation with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, and I think that stems from Pakistan did a great job of defending itself after its skirmish with India over the Pahalgam incident, and Pakistan basically showed its prowess. It was ready. I told everybody, Pakistan, if it's one thing Pakistan is going to be ready for, it's going to be India. If it's one thing Pakistan is going to be ready to win, it is going to be against India. Is Pakistan, from a power point of view, anywhere close to India? No, but it reminds me of a football team. When I was younger, we used to watch the Colts. And what you notice is the Colts had a great quarterback named Peyton Manning. But all of the other teams in this division that had to go against him, they put all their top draft picks. They would try to find elite pass rushers to take out the quarterback. And that's what Pakistan is. It's probably going to lose a lot of games like the rest of the division that was going against the Colts. They'll lose a lot of games against everybody else. But they were being built to defeat Indianapolis. They were built to take on great quarterbacks. And that's what Pakistan is. They're built to take on India. That's who they wake up and think about. That's who they go to sleep and they think about. And as they hum it along during the day, they're thinking about India. So that's their only concern. I think they can lose everything. If they defeat India or get some small victory, I think Pakistan is happy. So to me, it was no big surprise when I saw how prepared they were to defend themselves when India tried to slight them. But looking across the way in the Middle East was Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia said, oh, wow, they're the rich kid in class, but they don't get any street respect because although Saudi Arabia has one of the highest military spend per capita in the world, top 5, Saudi Arabia really doesn't have an ability to project power. And that's seen in a lot of things. Usually when you hear about Saudi Arabia, they're usually back in a group, such as General Burhan in Sudan. They're usually back in a group that's in the mix or one of the factions, but you never really hear about the Saudi forces. And when you do, you have a situation where they have a horrible showing against the impoverished Houthis, like in Yemen, when they try to go down there and try to assert their hegemony. And the Houthis, the Yemenis, although they one of the most impoverished countries in the world, they sent them home with hat in hand. You see this a situation in Qatar where they try to blockade Qatar, like tiny Qatar. Qatar punches above its weight, but Saudi Arabia is supposed to be a regional power, and they drastically outnumbered the population of Qatar, and they wasn't even able to blockade Qatar, which is another interesting thing because one of the levers Qatar used was Turkey. Turkey sent the troops down to Qatar to basically provide security while they were having a tiff with Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, although they have a lot of money, they're not that great at force projection. And I think they saw Pakistan and they say, these guys are tough. You know, Pakistan is arguably, I believe, the most powerful country in the Islamic world. I do believe Pakistan is the most powerful country in the Islamic world. It is a nuclear power, low tier A power, if that, because it has a nuclear power. Hundreds of million people, they're ready to rumble. Nice sized country. I always say if they were anywhere else in the world, they would be a very scary country. I mean, even where they are right now, they're a very scary country. So you have Pakistan, you have that link where you have this capital finance, this need for protection, maybe this insecurity in a more fragmented world coming from Saudi Arabia. And they started to build a deal. And somehow, I don't know how this happened, but the Erdogan administration, being as savvy as it was, they were able to get in on this deal. And this is another interesting component because usually Saudi Arabia and Turkey fall on opposite side of things. They recently aligned on some things such as what's going on in Syria. Well, we looking in the past, such as the situation with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey were opposite ends of things. The unfortunate situation with the journalist Khashoggi being murdered in a Saudi embassy in Turkey. They were on the opposite end of things, But there has also the Muslim Brotherhood. I can't forget the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia is vehemently against the Muslim Brotherhood, and Turkey hasn't been as strongly against the Muslim Brotherhood. So it's a lot of things that they bumped heads on, and Turkey usually sided more with Qatar in defiance of Saudi Arabia, especially you saw the Turkey and there's a lot of geopolitical moves as far as pipelines, getting those from the Persian Gulf, from that rich natural gas field from Qatar. But it's a lot of things where Saudi Arabia usually they're muscle because they're always using other people, or when they needed to fund or who they really stood behind, their big muscle has historically been Egypt, which is the most populous Arab country in the world, and it's their neighbor. So that was only logical. So I found it very interesting. One, Saudi Arabia built this partnership not with Egypt, but they built it with Pakistan. And then you got Turkey coming in now. And these countries, outside of being Islamic, they really don't have a lot in common. You do have some shared interests along the Red Sea with Turkey and Saudi Arabia, but for the most part, Turkey is more of this Eastern Mediterranean, Levant, Eurasian power that's growing, dealing with the struggles next to Russia, being a part of NATO. So you have that situation, and you have Saudi Arabia dealing more with threats from perceived threats in the MENA area, more like your Iran's, North and East Africa, more on the Arabian Peninsula, as I said, with Yemen, with its neighbors UAE, Qatar, etc. This usually has been their sphere. Then you have Pakistan, and don't forget, Turkey is a Turkic country. Saudi Arabia is an Arabic country. And then you have Pakistan, which I consider an Indo country, Indo-European, Indo-Aryan merge. So, and their primary concerns are in Central Asia and in South Asia. Now, don't get me wrong, this alliance do cover a lot of grounds. And when you look at this map geographically in this group, they're calling themselves, I believe it's called the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement, or the SMDA. When you look at them geographically, they kind of remind me of the Triple Entente leading up to World War One. But instead of France and Great Britain and Russia, in the center is Germany. So you have Germany in the center, you have Great Britain in the northwest, France to the west of Germany, and Russia to the east of Germany. It seems as though you have Iran in the center, Iran is in the center, and you have Turkey to the northwest, Saudi Arabia to the west, southwest, and then you have Pakistan to the east. So outside of really encapsulating Iran and a few other countries, such as Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries, they really have different spheres of influence. But you can see, I was surprised that Saudi Arabia wanted Turkey in, because obviously Turkey is going to be the big brother, I believe, in this agreement. And this is a NATO-style agreement. This is attack on one. The premise is attack on one is attack on all. And this is going to be a lot to chew. Basically, Turkey-Russia problems are a thing of the past. I don't think Russia is going to do anything to Turkey with 200 million Pakistanis right on its rear guard. So Saudi Arabia is going to be obviously the Bucks, right? You got Turkey playing an insider role. They're inside of NATO. They're inside of NATO. I'm not going to talk about all of the situation that's going to present when you have a NATO member part of another strategic defense agreement or alignment, all those conflict of interest that may arrive there. But you're going to have this development, you're going to have the industrialization, you're going to have the technology development. Let's not forget the infamous Bayraktar drones coming out of Turkey that's done a number from Russia-Ukraine war all the way to Libya, etc. So you're going to have all these things come together. Excuse me. But you're going to have all those things come together from the Turkish side, the money, the big bucks from Saudi Arabia, and then you're going to have Pakistan, this big, scary beast of a country. Pakistan, nuclear weapons, battle-hardened group of basically innumerable amount of soldiers that is going to be able to help project the power. So it is a very complementary relationship. And it spells big trouble for Iran if it wasn't big trouble already. This is a very potent alliance with a strong Iran, let alone its backward. And we can see why they want to keep a feckless Iran, because it sits in the middle of this alliance. So they're going to basically, these three countries are about to run a loop. They're about to run up the score. And this Central Asia, Middle East, this MENA area, if these three countries are aligned. So a lot of what I'm going to be looking for, because this is a collective security agreement, one strike on one is a strike on all. A lot of what I'm going to be looking for is who get brought in, if there's going to be other countries that are being brought in, and who get left out. Now, Saudi Arabia obviously is a vulnerable one militarily of this pact. It's a big country, and I think a lot of their military woes come from it being a very big country. Especially for its population. It's about 30 million people in Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia is like the largest country with no real rivers. You know, this is how dry it is. It's sparse. Most of the people, are up to like 1 in 3 to about 1 in 3 people, or roughly a third, is in either Riyadh or in the center of the country or Jeddah on the coast. So it's logistic nightmare, this country, which probably explains why they haven't been able to project power very well if you root this in geopolitics, if you root this in geography. But they don't have to now, because now they got two big brothers that can really help them out. Turkey has no problem geopolitically or projecting force, and Pakistan is not going to have no problem bringing in the muscle. So these three countries, they do make a formidable alliance for any other country out there. Probably only going to be, once this thing is cemented, definitely going to be probably just second to NATO, and they're going to be formidable. And with Pakistan, you also get kind of a side deal with China, because China and Pakistan are two of the closest allies on the planet, and they value each other deeply. But the size of Saudi Arabia is massive. And I think if you put Turkey and Pakistan together, Saudi Arabia is still larger than those two together. It's about the size of, it's larger than the entire United States east of the Mississippi River. So you're dealing with a big country with not that many people. You can understand their security concerns, but they have a crap load of money. And they've done a lot of work for the last couple of years, a normalized relationship between Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Both of these countries already had a relatively decent relationship with Pakistan from the military security point of view. So you can see Pakistan being a glue that brings them together. But this is breaking news, in my opinion, coming out of this part of the world. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. And until next time, take care. Bantu up.